You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Just Japan podcast. It is episode number 208. My name is Kevin O'Shea. I am a Canadian who is living and working here in Asia, currently based in Penang, Malaysia. This is the podcast about all things Japan. That's right, Japan is a place I called home for many years. If you don't know, my wife is from Japan. My kids were born in Japan, and it's a place that's near and dear to me. And we're back with the Just Japan podcast after a long hiatus of many years. Dusted off this podcast. We've already put out several episodes in recent months, in the last month or so, and I'm really happy that so many of you awesome people are back listening to the show. It's very exciting to see more and more of you fine folks joining for each episode. And in this episode, I chat with a really inspiring guy. I chat with Tony Vega, online known as Tony.Vega. Tony is an American who is currently based in Hawaii, but he has lived in Japan. He actually lived in Kobe, Japan at the same time that I did, and we basically lived in the same neighborhood for several years, but we never met each other, which is kind of neat, kind of cool. So Tony is a content creator, and he has a lot of wonderful, amazing Japan-related content. He also has a fantastic podcast called Japan Station. And I was on an episode of that podcast back in 2021. And in this episode, I chat with Tony all about the incredible adventure he had, the inspiring adventure. Tony is legally blind, but that doesn't stop him from doing amazing things in life at all. It doesn't even slow him down. And Tony, in 2023, just last fall, he walked the entire old Tokaido Road, the Tokaido Road. He walked from Kyoto to Tokyo, about 500 kilometers. And we talk about this incredible adventure that he shared online, that he streamed and shared with all of us. We talk about this incredible adventure. And so it's an exciting conversation, and we're going to talk all about that. And so let's just jump into this episode because it is really, really exciting. So everyone sit back and check out my conversation with Tony Vega, Tony.Vega, about his walk on the Tokaido Road in Japan. All right, folks, so we're back with another episode of the Just Japan podcast. Dusted off, and this is the first kind of recent interview on the podcast in a while. The last few episodes I've been kind of borrowing interviews from another podcast, but here we're talking with, for the first time, Tony Vega. Tony, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Great to be here, and you know, I listened to you before I started doing my own show, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's very cool, and I had a chance to be on your podcast a few years back. We were talking just before we started recording, and the Just Japan podcast has been dusted off, restarted, revamped. I kept the feed alive all these years, but
I told you to do it, right? I told you
exactly.
to do it. I told you people will be happy when you come back.
Yes. Yes, that is very true. And it's amazing to look at the statistics and see that even for a show that was essentially dormant for years, it gets more downloads than the shows I've been working hard on in recent years. But nonetheless, I'm happy to be back, and people are happy to have it back. And I'm happy to have you here to talk about your incredible adventure that you had in 2023, walking the old Tokaido Road, which is really amazing. It's something that I used to hear a lot about from Softy Papa, Kurt Bell, back in the days when he was making his incredible YouTube videos in Shizuoka and exploring. But before we get into the walk, can you tell us, or tell the listeners, a little bit about yourself, where you're based, and then kind of how you got involved in all things Japan, I suppose?
Sure. So, I have lived in Japan. I go back, pretty regularly, but currently I live in Hawaii, which is like the most Japan place in the U.S. A lot of Japanese people here.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. I worked at a Japanese company here, and basically I speak more Japanese some days than I do English. But yeah, so I basically I'm a content creator if you want to sum it all up. But I do content for Japanese audiences. I do Japanese language content focused on like digital art and marketing, stuff like that. I have a YouTube and a podcast, whatever, in Japanese. But like I've also been doing a lot of English content focused on Japan since like 2016. So in 2016, I started japankyo.com. I was blogging, writing news articles. I got a few viral stories here and there. And then it was 2017 when I started doing the podcasts. So Japan Station was the one that I had you on, and I did I do my interviews there, and then Ichimon Japan is my other show where I talk to my friend about like some funny Japan focused contents, topics, stuff like that. But and then I have the YouTube at Japankyo News on YouTube, and that's where I'm uploading like everything as well, aside from the podcast, like audio only content. I also have the Tokaido challenge videos, and occasionally I do other stuff as well. So I'm busy. I'm doing a lot of stuff, but if you're into Japan, I think you might enjoy my podcast or my YouTube channel.
Absolutely. So folks, go there and listen. There will be links in the show notes for sure. So when I kind of thinking about in 2023, when I was watching you I was following your adventures on X, on Twitter, and one thing that for people who do follow your content or who haven't, when they do start, they'll quickly notice that you've got some pretty good Japanese chops. I'm someone who lived in Japan for a while, and my Japanese is relatively limited. So I'm just curious, with regards to Japanese, when did you start studying Japanese, and how did that journey happen, or was that something you studied when you were in university? Before that, was it just something when you lived in Japan that you picked up?
So I kind of started studying, I guess, like around, I don't know, like maybe 7th grade or whatever. I got a book.
Okay, wow.
Whatever, but I mean, I learned a few words here and there. It wasn't anything significant. But basically, I got into it through like anime and video games. I went to Peru for a bit, and there was a bunch of anime there. And I watched it, Dragon Ball, Captain Tsubasa, and then later I learned like, oh, that's Japanese.
Okay.
And it kind of, snowballed from there. But in the US, I started studying a little bit in high school and university, studied abroad, went on jet. I was in Kobe.
Yeah.
I know you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's a very interesting connection there, folks. So Tony was living in Kobe, Japan, where I lived. And we talked about this a few years back, but, that was on your podcast. And here we are on this one. So I'm curious, tell us a little bit. You mentioned that you were a jet. And I know a lot of people who listen to the Just Japan podcast, there are people who were jets. There are people who have aspirations of becoming a jet. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to Japan that time? How did that work out for you?
So for jet, I had studied abroad in Osaka first, and that was a great experience. And I knew I wanted to go back to Japan. So what I did was I went back to Miami, Florida, where I was at the time, and I worked for a year teaching Japanese to like kids, all age ranges. But yeah, I was doing that, and I was applying to jet. And thankfully, it worked out, and I got placed in the Kansai area in Kobe, where I asked to get placed. And I spent 3 years there, and it was a wonderful experience. I worked junior high, elementary school for the blind.
Wow.
I'm very happy I did it. But by the end of that, I decided I wanted to. Well, I was thinking maybe I want to teach Japanese in a university. So I ended up coming to Hawaii to get a master's degree in Japanese language and linguistics.
Okay.
I did that. And then I ended up working at a magazine and doing a bunch of other stuff. So I never ended up doing what I thought I would do. But I came to Hawaii. I'm very glad I came here. And the experience doing that master's degree was wonderful and really deepened my understanding of not just Japanese, but language in general.
Wow, that's fantastic. That is so cool. And there we were. And what were those years that you were in Kobe, to refresh my memory? You were there when I was there, weren't they? We were there at the same time.
I think we did. I think we may have overlapped. Yeah, 2010 to 2013.
Yes, absolutely. I was there from 2008 to 2016. So we were there at the same time.
Yeah.
And I know, like where I lived on Port Island, there were a lot of jets. I think
there were. I was there.
You were there on Port Island, so we lived in the same freaking place.
Yeah, we were neighbors basically, but we didn't know it.
We really were. I mean, Port Island, it's really interesting. My wife is from Osaka, and she used to refer to Port Island as the Inaka, And she always talked about people from Port Island were Inakajin because they like rarely ever left, even though it was just this short little bridge you could walk across,
Yeah.
to the mainland, air quotes. That's how a lot of the locals talked about it. Like, we're going to Kobe. It's like, well, aren't you in Kobe? But yeah. So, I mean, you're a very interesting guy. You do a lot of interesting things that are Japan related. Absolutely. And what the main reason I wanted to chat to you, or the main theme of this episode, is to talk about your walk, the old Tokaido Road. And there's a few things that make this very special, of course. When anyone does any kind of long distance walk, I have a lot of awe, admiration, respect for them. I think a lot of people who maybe have fallen in love with Japan over the years, they kind of, I don't know. For me, it's a very romantic thing. These kind of long walks. I've had a very good friend of mine, Kevin Tarpey, who's been on a few episodes of this podcast. He was also on the Just Asia podcast and my Supernatural Japan podcast. He is based in Shimane, and near Matsue, and he's a walker, and he does a lot of long walks, and he did the big pilgrimage around Shikoku, the 88 temples, and he chatted with me about that, and I always find that really amazing. Now, you made this long walk, but also it's very special because I mean I even saw on your content, you are legally blind, you do have. So that even makes it for me more awe-inspiring that you did it. But before we jump into talking about walking the old Tokaido Road, I wonder if you could tell the listeners a little bit about what is the old Tokaido Road, or what was it?
Sure. So the Tokaido is this very historically significant road that basically connects Kyoto and Tokyo. In terms of history, it was most important during the Edo period. So we're talking like 1600 to like 1868.
Okay.
And some people call it like the Samurai Road, partially because the kind of importance of it was that back in those days, the feudal lords had to move to Edo for a certain amount of time, and then they would go with their entourages, and then they had to go back to their domains, and it was a big back and forth. Basically, the shogun wanted to keep everybody in line and make sure that they didn't rebel. But there were these 5 main roads, famous roads, and the most famous of them was the Eastern Sea Route. That's a literal translation, Tokaido. And it runs, again, Kyoto along the coast. Let's see, it goes Shiga Prefecture, Mie Prefecture, into Aichi Prefecture, then Shizuoka, then Kanagawa, and then finally Tokyo. So from Kyoto to Nipponbashi, which is right by Tokyo Station on Tokyo. And there's these 53 post towns along the way. These were these important like kind of way stations where people kind of stop along the way because people used to walk it. So it takes a long time. And these were like immortalized in this famous like 53 like ukiyo-e woodblock prints. So people may have seen those. But along the way, it's a winding road because there's mountains and everything along the way. But it's about 500 kilometers, 300 miles, basically in terms of the distance.
Wow. And what was the inspiration for you, or what led you to decide that you wanted to do this? I mean, to take on a feat like this is something. I mean, obviously you got to have a good inspiration. There's a reason why you do it, but also then obviously a lot of planning and logisticalness. There's a new word. A lot of logistical planning goes to doing something like this, to taking a task like this on. So what inspired you to do it? And can you tell us a little bit about the planning that was involved before you actually flew over to Japan and started the walk?
Sure. So in terms of what inspired me to do this, I do enjoy walking, and it for me personally, as somebody who's legally blind, like that is something I can do. There's some things that I can't do or can't do as well as a sighted person, but I can walk. I can do that, and it's pretty fun. So I do enjoy that. Sometimes there's been times when I've been living in Japan, I go like, I'm just gonna walk today. I just start walking. I've done that a few times.
Oh, and that's and that speaks to my heart. I'm a walker. I've always been a walker. Even when I lived in Seoul, Korea, back in say 2003, I was living there working as an English teacher, and so it's before smartphones, before the GPS stuff. I would just get like the Seoul subway map, and I would look at it, and I would say, okay, I'm at this station. I'm going to walk these 10 stations today, or these 15 stations to this spot, and I don't know what's there, but I'm going to go there and find out. And I would literally walk for like 5, 6, 7 hours. I'd walk to some cool location. eat at a restaurant, take some pictures, walk around, look around, speak to a few old timers, have a beer somewhere, and then I'd get on the train and come home. And that
Yeah,
was just,
it's fun.
it was a lot of fun. Yeah. So you're a walker at heart, and so tell us about the planning here, because I've never done anything like this.
Yeah. So, I decided I was going to do this. I wanted to do some kind of fun thing that would kind of connect both sides of what I do, the Japanese language and the English language side, right? And I thought, this is perfect, right? Like I can document this the whole way and then release videos in English later. And it worked out. It's perfectly, like, it's exactly what I wanted to do. So, so in terms of planning, I basically got the list of the post towns that I talked about, the 53 post towns, right? And I just started like figuring out where I can stay along the way, right? Because a lot of these places are very rural, right? So there's no like hotel in these places. So I would have to figure out like how much can I realistically walk in a day? But the thing is that I'm legally blind. I get lost a lot because one, sometimes Google Maps just bugs out. I can't see street signs. I end up going the wrong way. Google Maps then like tries to take me some other way. And there was so many times when I got so lost. But like middle of rice field, I had to like wave down a guy on some heavy machinery. I don't even know what it was. I could only hear it. It's like, hey, I'm trying to get to Toyohashi. Excuse me.
You on the combine harvester, I think.
Yeah. They're like, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. And then he's like, okay, wait. And then he has to walk up to the road.
Wow. That's amazing. Because I just even think on on a small scale, just like walking around, like, so now I'm based in Malaysia and I'm in Georgetown. I think it was just like we were in KL. We were in KL last week for our winter holiday, and we were there in KL, Kuala Lumpur for a couple of days. And we were planning on going to the shopping mall, and I put it into Google Maps and the directions. And my wife's like, "Where are we going?" I'm like, "I don't know. We're just going where Google takes us, I guess." And like, she's like, "I don't think this is the right place." I'm like, "Well, this blue line says it is." So she was like, "This is a kind of a weird alley." Like, well, hey, Google knows more than I do. That's what I just kept saying. But I can only imagine, like when you're in the Inaka.
Yeah. Like Google does get me there. But instead of taking like the simple route, which is maybe like half a kilometer more, it takes me down like the ridiculous like rice fields, which is like half a kilometer less. I'm like, no, it's not worth the headache, but I can't see the map very well. So I just have to follow it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. So wow. So did you basically kind of map out and figure out, were you really precise with this? Was it kind of like, it's going to take me, because some people I've met over the years are real sticklers for planning. They would have every moment planned out, but you weren't that case. Okay.
No, I was very loose because one, I wasn't sure how much I could realistically walk in a day.
Okay. Yeah.
So like I only booked like the first maybe 7 nights of hotels.
Oh, okay.
And then after that, I by that point, I had a better idea of like about how long it would take me to get to a certain point. And then I started booking the next hotels as I was going along.
Okay.
And I came to the conclusion that right around 20 kilometers was the best distance to shoot for me, given the amount of extra time it takes me compared to a sighted person who can just see the signs and not get as lost as much. So that was like the realistic distance I could shoot for on any single day.
Wow. So when did you arrive in Japan? So, I mean, I followed you along on Twitter, but it's getting, I'm
Sure. Yeah.
I'm old.
No.
Things are foggy.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So I arrived September 20th and I started the journey September 21st, I believe.
Okay.
Was it? Yeah, it was right around there. Yeah. I believe.
Nice. So you were in the fall, and how many days altogether did it take you to
so it took
spoiler alert, everyone, he did it.
I did make it.
He didn't die.
Yeah, I didn't die.
Because we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, I recorded this predictively.
He wasn't eaten by frogs in one of those rice fields that he got lost in. Eaten by paddy frogs.
No. I did make it to Tokyo. So it took me 29 days, but there were 4 days off that were necessary for logistics, and there was a little bit of an injury, like a blister. I needed to go buy shoes and just various things, and moving from one place to hotels, various things ended up, I took 4 days off along the way. So 25 days of travel.
Okay. And let me see now. So all of you folks listening, Tony was really doing an amazing job of sharing this adventure on Twitter. That's where I was following along, and I can remember actually I was in school teaching, and I kept when I'd have like a break, like when my kids would go to PE class, I'd like pull a Twitter and start like watching some of your videos, or I'd be eating my lunch watching your videos. I'm like, this is so cool. And so I just like, this is really neat. And I retweeted a few times, and I was trying to get a few more eyeballs. And I remember I was sharing like to my Gaijin Twitter feed, because Gaijin Twitter is my big thing. And I'm just like, guys, like, look at this, look what this guy's doing. But I can remember a few things. Like I seem to remember one night where you had talked about you got to your hotel or a hotel, and you were exhausted, and you were like, I couldn't get food. And and like some person had given you like a gift of some cake somewhere.
Yeah.
And you were just like, this is my dinner. I'm eating little pieces of cake. And then I can remember another time where you had to like, and I'm sure maybe this happened more than once, but to follow the route, you actually had to, you'd walk for the day, but then you actually had to backtrack to get to a train station or to an accommodation, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could share a few of those tales of misadventure, I suppose. What were some of the, now, I mean, obviously there was a lot of high moments, but what were some of the more challenging parts? You've already kind of alluded to blisters and new shoes and things like this, but what were some of those things that you found, and aside from getting lost, challenging?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, those moments there's a 100% English version of all this being compiled over on my YouTube channel, so you can watch the whole journey. But like, fantastic. For example, in terms of a mental moment that I really felt bad, like I felt like down, and you can hear this in my voice in the video. Like I was kind of starting to almost tear up, but like there was this one part in Shizuoka where there were three parts that just for my personal safety, because I'm legally blind, I can't like do a hike on my own, like literally, because it's like cobblestones and cliffs and stuff like that, right? So like there was one part in Shizuoka called the Sata Toge, and that's the Sata mountain pass. Okay. It's famous, like you can see it in the famous woodblock print. You can see Mount Fuji from there. I really wanted to do that part, but I just couldn't. I for my own safety, I couldn't. But I wanted to do it so bad. And I just had to come to terms with not being able to do that like 6-7 kilometer part. So basically I got on a train station and skipped that part, just got off on the next train station and kept walking from there. Okay. But like for me, why that was so, how can I put it, like a negative thing for me? Because like part of this journey was, for me, for my own personal like satisfaction in a sense, like to prove to myself I can do this. Yeah. Also to show people like, hey, I have a white cane, things are difficult, but I find a way to do this and check this out. Mm-hmm. Like I actually got sponsorship from the Hawaii Association of the Blind financially, because this thing costs like $7,000 to do. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And that was a moment for me where it's like, I lost control in the sense of like, I have no control over this situation. Nothing I can do in that moment. I have no friends in that part of Japan. Nobody can walk with me. There's nothing I can do to actually walk that part. I just have to accept that I can't have control over this, skip that part for my own safety and move on with it. And, I'm fine. I dealt with it. But in that moment when I was talking to the camera, explaining the situation, I was like, oh, I really don't want to skip this. I really don't want to skip this. And it was like a really mentally, like it was a sad moment for me, but it's also like important to realize like we all have those moments in our lives where we have to accept that we don't have control over a situation and just deal with it. And that was one for me. Yeah.
I think we're just coming out of about 3 years of those moments, aren't we?
Yeah,
the COVID day, right? I mean, when I was on your podcast, we were talking about all of my crazy experiences with being locked out of China, yet working from China and being in Japan. And I think that was, my wife and I, our slogan for 2020 was just Shogunai. Shogunai. There's literally, and we just look at each other constantly, Shogunai. Like, this is all so out of our hands, right?
Absolutely.
So, you mentioned one thing just there that, that this was an area where you didn't know anyone who could help you. But one thing I did get from watching your videos during your journey, and I didn't, obviously see all of them. I would just like check in from time to time, and not even every day, but a lot of the days I'd check in. You did have a lot of people who were supporters who came out to cheer you on, to talk to you, to give you cake, to walk with you. I'm curious. I'm a content creator. I've been a content creator for years. Obviously there's people I suppose who are there, who watch me doing things and listen. But how did you make those connections? Where did that kind of caring community that you had come from? And because it seemed like you had people who cared, which is amazing.
Yeah. That was incredibly moving. Like 4 or 5 people came out on the day I departed from the bridge Sanjo Ohashi in Kyoto. Like 5 people were waiting for me in Tokyo at the bridge in Nihonbashi. Along the way, like in Nagoya, every single night somebody came out to see me. I don't think I paid for dinner like once in Nagoya.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. In Tokyo, I had a party the day after I arrived, and like 20 something people came to. So like it was incredible.
You're at a bar or a pub or something like that. I saw.
Yeah. In Tokyo, a friend's bar, and they all came out and just came with gifts and stuff, and it was just incredibly moving. And where that all came from, there were like maybe 3 people in Tokyo that were my pre-existing friends, but aside from that, like this was all the people that follow me on X, Twitter, whatever, for my Japanese language content. Many of these are artists in Japan that I've worked with. I've assisted them, like giving them advice on how to, sell their art online. And my stuff in Japanese is I try to produce as much helpful content for like these digital artists in Japan. And I've done private consultations and stuff like that. So I've really gotten to know a lot of people. And the fun thing is that they're all over Japan. So it was like I was in the middle of nowhere in Aichi Prefecture, and like somebody lived right by there, and we went to like the local like grocery store and had like some smoothie or whatever. So like it was amazing. And that is like during the day, most days were not fun. Like I'd get up in the morning, I just have to decide I'm going to do it, and I do it, and I enter this like almost zombie mode sometimes where I'm just like walk.
Yeah.
But getting to see all these people all over Japan, them making time to come out and hang out and see me and telling me that they were happy to see me, like that was just a wonderful, wonderful aspect of this. And it's all thanks to the fact that I've been doing all this content in Japanese for creators in Japan.
That's fantastic. I mean, that kind of leading me into my next question. Obviously, these were some of very high moments that you had of this journey. What were some of the other high moments you had? What were some of the other kind of memories, the takeaways once it was done that you said, "Oh wow, that was an amazing experience," or just kind of small or big? Share a few of those with us.
Yeah.
We'd love to know.
There's many, but for example, as I told you, like I didn't plan out all of this trip. Like I had the course. Obviously, I knew where I was going, right? Because it's the Tokaido. It's set out. But like once I got to like Nagoya, basically, I didn't have that much time to like research every single aspect of what was coming.
Okay, yeah.
So I had some like surprises.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and one surprise, it was just like it was a little scary, but also like really cool. And it's this chunk of like I think it's popular as a cycling course, but it runs from Yaizu, again in Shizuoka Prefecture, to the city of Shizuoka, and it must be around 10 kilometers or maybe a little bit more. But it's this stretch all along the coast. So you see the ocean on one side, kind of like mountains on the other side. There's 4 tunnels along the way. And one tunnel took me like 14 minutes to walk through. So it was crazy long. And I didn't know that was coming.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I'm walking, and it's kind of raining that day. And then I get to the point, it's like, oh, ocean. Oh, this is pretty cool. This is the closest I've been to the ocean. So I'm shooting my video, walk. Oh, huge tunnel. Okay. Can I go through this? I couldn't. I was too scared to go into it because there was no like walking area. So I was like, oh, do I have to walk back? Am I stuck here? And then a guy that was running like on the other side, like passed by and goes, excuse me, hey, can I walk into this tunnel? I was like, yeah, you can do it. It's like, really? Like, is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah, go. It's like, okay, really? Just stick to the left. Okay. He was like so nonchalant about it. Like, okay. So I start walking, and it was this amazing just chunk of road that I would have never walked that, obviously. No reason to ever do that.
Yeah.
But it became like one of the most memorable parts of the trip. And it was especially memorable because I was not expecting it. And it was just there, and it was so cool. And I document this whole thing. I think it's part 6 of my video series on YouTube. So yeah, it was really cool. And I would say, like, check it out if you're into cycling or running. It's definitely an area that's pretty cool to go through.
And go to Tony's YouTube series, everyone, to check this out too, to see what it looks like. You're painting a great image right now, but I'm looking forward to seeing that as well. Wow, that's so cool. I mean, I hear of these things, and I'm jealous in so many ways, because these are the kind of adventures one day I hope to have. But it's like you said, it's a financial thing.
Yeah.
I suppose, I would have to plan it in a way where my family would be okay with me to go somewhere for a long period of time and spend a lot of time. So sometimes, I don't know, in the future,
it's tough.
These long walks.
Really tough. And when you can spin it as content and then write it off as business expenses, which I did, like, that's great. But it's a huge time commitment, right? Because not only was it the 29 days or 30 days in Japan, it's all the planning, having to buy the gear. I was training beforehand to make sure, like, I was okay to do something like this. Yeah. So it was a big time commitment.
That is, but I mean, it's just, it's neat. It's neat to hear this. So, okay. I mean, it's fantastic. So you finished it. You finished your walk. You're at Nipponbashi in Tokyo. Those awesome people show up. What was it like to finally wrap it up and finish? Was there? I can remember, like, recently we had at my international school I teach at. We had a big musical. We had a secondary musical, and then the primary kids had a musical. And I was talking to some of the secondary kids, and I was saying to them, I was like, when I was younger in university, I used to do a lot of plays. And we'd invest our whole lives into this play for like months. We lived it, we ate it, we breathed it. And when it was done, we were lost souls. So we called it post-traumatic stress disorder, because our whole lives had been invested in this play. And once it was done, it was like, wait a second, what do I do now? I've got nothing else to do with my life. I just will go home and stare blankly at my wall because I don't know what to do. So when you were done this walk, how was that to finish? How did it feel, to have such a tremendous big accomplishment done?
So in terms of overall, like, I'll put it this way, like, the experience itself wasn't fun, but it was enjoyable. And, like, there was that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely glad I did it. And no regrets. And I think it was, the right thing to do. I'm glad it all worked out. As for, like, the immediate, feeling afterwards, like, of course, right after it was the party, and, hey, we're all happy. And then, right after that, I had to fly back. And then it was, of course, you go back to daily life. And honestly, like, most of my life here in Hawaii is not on the beach, like surfing or anything. Like, I'm on my computer producing content, writing. I do a lot of writing. I shoot videos. I do podcasts. So I'm here. I'm in this little room.
Yeah. You're creating content. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I love doing that, and I had a lot of work to, like, catch up on, of course, too. But, like, it was just a strange feeling to just go back to, like, I don't have to walk 20 kilometers today. I can just sit in a chair now.
So you weren't thinking, I'm going to, like, that famed Alan Booth book, The Roads to Sata, where he walked across all of Japan. You weren't thinking, next, maybe I'll conquer all of Japan.
So I am thinking that in a sense at the moment. Like, I maybe not all of Japan. I kind of don't want to do Hokkaido because it's, like, too rural.
That would pose some challenges potentially. Yeah.
No, maybe we'll see. But I would love to do another incarnation, the continuation of this. But maybe Kyoto to Hiroshima or down to Kyushu. I don't know. But
okay.
These are things that I want to do. But of course, it comes down to funding, being able to raise funds and all that. So for the moment, I'm focusing on getting the video series done. It should be done very, very, very shortly. And then you never know, right? Like I could use that as a way to like shop it to some outdoor sporting, like, like clothing thing or whatever.
Yeah.
So
and get yourself a sponsorship or sponsorships. Yeah.
Exactly. So I would love to do that, but we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But in terms of overall, like this kind of experience, like for me personally, for example, like I wasn't with anybody on like during the day. Sometimes in the evenings I would go out to eat, but like even like on the road, like it was really tough to find a convenience store, right? So what I would do is I would go to the convenience store in the morning, usually it was, 2 rice balls and a sandwich or something like that. Like most days I was eating the same thing.
Yeah.
Because like I had to eat standing up on the middle of the road, like side of the road somewhere, so easy stuff to carry.
Yeah, of course.
And then in the evenings when I wasn't with somebody, I had to like find restaurants. I couldn't see the signs for what the restaurant was. Like sometimes I could identify it by the smell, but other times I would walk in, say, "Excuse me, what kind of restaurant is this?" And then they say, "Oh, it's soba." They go, "Oh, I just had soba like 2 days in a row. I don't want soba. Sorry." So like every aspect of this was a chore, right? Like even finding a sports equipment store because I wanted to buy toe socks. Like that was more of a chore for me than it would be for a sighted person, where it might take you, Kevin, like it might take you like 10 minutes. It took me 30 minutes, right? Now I know this is part of my daily life. Like this is nothing new. I was expecting that. I knew that, but to have to experience that like 30 days, whatever in a row, and then go back to like, oh, I'm here in Hawaii. I don't have to worry about that. My partner is here. She cooks, like you do get that extra sense of appreciation, right? Where it's not that I necessarily forgot it, but you just kind of remember it in a sense.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. So, I don't want to keep you much longer, good sir. You got to do a lot of things. You're a busy man. And I wonder, well, I was wondering if you could just share with the folks listening, where can they find all of this content? You mentioned it at the beginning, but I want to hear you mention it again. Where can they find all of these things that you did and are doing, and in the future when they want to follow you and see what's up?
So, of course, the video series is on YouTube at Japankyo News, JAPANKYO News on YouTube. And there's a Tokaido Challenge playlist. So I think by the time it's done, it'll be 11 parts, I believe. But I do post all my podcasts, all my content, English language, Japan focused content to japankyo.com. So, if you look me up on Apple Podcasts, whatever, all my stuff is there, but the easiest place is japankyo.com. And my personal X is at the Vega Tony. I do produce content in English and Japanese. And so, if you're into that sort of thing, you can check it out, but that is my biggest account. That's where I'm most active.
Okay, cool. That's fantastic. Awesome. Well, it has been absolutely wonderful talking to you. It's so cool. One of these things, again, I mentioned, maybe I'll send you a link to a couple of these really cool podcast episodes I did with my friend Kevin Tarpey, who I met as an English teacher back in Korea more than 20 years ago. And now he lives in Japan and he does these epic walks, and he has a partner who allows him to do so. And I think he also has the flexibility career-wise to be able to do so as well. And I always, again, live vicariously. And one day I'm hoping I will be able to do something similar as well. When my kids get older, and as they are getting older, as a school teacher, I'll take advantage of these summer holidays and maybe, take a big chunk of one of those and do an epic walk. And I would love to do it in Japan.
And then I'll interview you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There we go. Tony, thank you so much. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Well, that was amazing. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Tony, for coming on the Just Japan podcast. Of course, I will be putting all of the links below in the show notes for all of Tony's content. Go to japankyo.com and you'll find all this stuff. You can follow him on Twitter, of course. Just do a search for Tony.Vega on X on Twitter. And I'll put a link, of course, to his YouTube channel and all that playlist of this incredible walk. All these links will be in the show notes below. And you can also, there'll be a link to the podcast episode when I was on Japan Station, which it was just a few years ago. It was really cool to talk to him then. That's the first time we got to meet. But again, go to japankyo.com. That's where he said the hub is for everything. All right, guys. Well, that does it for another episode of the Just Japan podcast. Again, I'm really happy to be back with this podcast. Tony had told me to keep the feed alive and bring the show back one day. A lot of people had done that over the years, and here we are. We're back. So again, thank you all for listening. Now, one thing, back in the day when the Just Japan podcast was really one of the few podcasts about Japan, and we did really well back in the day, because there wasn't much Japan content in the podcast space. Well, obviously, podcasts are all over the place now, a dime a dozen, one might even say. There's a lot of great stuff out there, a lot of stuff that maybe is not as great. But there's a lot of competition, and it's much harder to get noticed in the podcast space. One thing, for example, I realized just last month was that the Just Japan podcast wasn't on Spotify. It wasn't on Amazon Music because Spotify wasn't a thing when I was making the Just Japan podcast. Well, it was a thing, but it was only for music. There weren't podcasts on it. So the Just Japan podcast is now on Spotify. It is now on Amazon Music. If that's how you prefer to listen to your podcast now, please go give us a follow over there. And, give us a review, please, especially in those newer spaces like Amazon, like Spotify. Give us a review, give us a rating. We really need that because right now it's really hard to search for those podcasts. Our podcast, the Just Japan podcast, we don't really pop up because we haven't had enough downloads and listens. Here on Apple Podcasts, of course, the space where we've been for so many years, there's a lot of amazing reviews and ratings from years gone by, but we would love some new ones. I would love some new ones. That would be fantastic. There's also, of course, a Facebook group, Facebook page. Go check the links all below. I'm very active on the Facebook page. Recently, I've gotten into creating a lot of YouTube shorts because I discovered the remix button. So I'm going through my back catalog of amazing Japan content and creating lots of wonderful, fun, new YouTube shorts with a mix of newer content in there as well. And I've been sharing those on Twitter, of course, on X. You can follow me at MadForMaple. And then, of course, on the Facebook page. And the link is below for that, guys. So those are some things I would like you to do. Of course, follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter I'm on Insta at JLandKev. All the links for that will be below in the show notes as well. And again, help the Just Japan podcast grow. Share our episodes in any Japan groups you're into, and help like-minded people discover the podcast. A lot of listeners who are old OG listeners are very happy that we're back, but let's get some new listeners as well, and I need your help for that. All right. Well, that's it. Another episode, another fantastic conversation with someone in Japan doing really amazing things. And I'll be back very soon with a new episode of the Just Japan podcast, episode 209, coming your way really soon. And guys, I hope you are doing well wherever you are in the world. And stay safe and stay healthy, folks. Bye-bye.